Shapers are more honest runners, and they are just trying to do their thing and show off. Shaper decks typically feature a lot of moving parts, in contrast with the other previous two decks we've seen, where every card does something straightforward. There are lots of cards in this Hayley deck that require other cards to be played, kind of like a combo, in order to get maximum potential. Technical Writer, for example, requires you to install lots of hardware or program beforehand before you can gain lots of money from it. Aesop's Pawnshop does nothing by itself. You need to trash another of your installed cards to gain money. So as you can see, it can be a bit clunky, a lot of moving parts, kind of like gears in a machine. Now, this Hayley deck screams Shaper, and Shaper means a lot of things. Shapers tend to be very amorphous, meaning that they change shape at will, morphing the rig basically morphing the rig to fit the needs of the current matchup. This is most clearly exhibited with their trademark card self-modifying code, which allows them to install programs at paid ability speed, meaning that you can install a program during a run. This is something that the other factions have very limited access to. This allows you to tutor up the correct solution for the ice that you're currently facing against, allowing you to break it very efficiently. And this Hayley deck packs a lot of right tools for the right time. As you can see, their breakers are very diverse, and David is also a pseudo breaker in that can also break subroutines. So you can fetch a lot of the correct tools at the correct time, and as such is one of the skill testing aspects of this deck. It trades out some disruption ability, unlike criminals and anarchs, which can potentially steal credits from the corp or destroy cards more easily. Shaper decks typically don't have that much interaction with the corp in terms of disrupting their game plan. As such, the runner, you have to focus more on efficiency with your economy cards and efficiency with your breakers. Speaking of efficiency, this Hayley deck has some cards that pay off very well in the long term. U-Backs, for example, is their console, which allows them to draw a card every single turn. This means that as the game goes longer, U-Backs will pay off more and more, leaving you with a very unstoppable runner in the late game due to all the trickle effects that come down from cards such as U-Backs, along with like Technical Writer and Aesop's Pawnshop, two cards that we saw previously. Shapers are also excellent at decoding code gates. You can see that one of their code gate breakers in this deck is Cyber Cipher, which has a base strength of 4. That is ridiculous. You don't often see that on breakers, such a very high base strength to begin with, and at a measly 2 install cost. Of course, this can only be directed at a single server. So if it's directed on R&D, for example, you cannot use it to break remote ice. But nonetheless, it gives you a very efficient option for a single server. Shapers are also able to get in when you least expect it, and as such are a very fearsome force to be reckoned with. As a general rule of thumb, if you're playing against Shaper as the corp, you should always expect that they can get into your server. It's just a matter of whether they want to or not. Weaknesses for the runner include its slow setup overhead, or rather huge setup overhead. Because a lot of these cards that give you more money and cards such as U-Backs are expensive, they typically have to wait a few turns before they pay out, and as such a corp can easily rush them out, meaning that they score lots of agendas before the runner can even think of contesting them. Shapers are also weak at breaking sentries. In fact, this deck was specifically designed such that you have a very hard time breaking sentries. The low strength sentries can be broken fairly efficiently by Femme Fatale with only 1 credit to break each subroutine. However, at 9 install costs, you probably don't want to be using this very early on. For the bigger sentries, on the other hand, David is a very good option. As long as it's 5 strength or above, you can break sentries with David. However, this comes with a limited number of power counters, so that's a downside. Typically, your middle ground with sentry breaking is with this AI breaker, Brahman. So this deck is kind of centered around Brahman, which we'll talk about more later on. But yes, this is something to be very aware of when whether you're picking up this deck for the first time or whether you're passing it to a new player. you need to inform them that this deck has very few good sentry breaking options. Chances are you need to start the run with a lot of money if you plan on breaking sentries. Alright, another questionable weakness is that this deck is very hard to pilot because your ID ability is very hard to use. Now, this ability sounds easy at first glance. It allows you to install 2 cards within the span of a single click. However, using this correctly, optimally, is the tricky part. Imagine a scenario where you have these 2 cards in your hand, a cash which gives you money, and one of your breakers, your barrier breakers. You want to install the cash because you are quite poor right now, so you do that, and you have money left over to install your barrier breaker. But do you choose to do so? Hayley's ability is optional. If you choose to use her ability, you might put yourself at too low a credit level, and you might not even need this barrier breaker at the end of the day if the corp does not have any installed barriers. On the other hand, if you choose not to install the barrier breaker, you will be not maximizing your ID ability, and as such you'll be playing less efficiently than you could possibly be. So trying to maximize your efficiency while still making optimal plays is very difficult indeed, and it's a very skill testing part of this deck. Now, some interesting lines of play. I want to talk about Brahman here because this is a pretty tricky breaker to use as well. Brahman is a very good breaker at first sight. It has very decent base strength, and it's an AI breaker, meaning that it can break subroutines of any ice subtype, barrier, code gate, sentry. The downside to Brahman is that it has a very nasty clause at the end which forces you to bounce one of your installed breakers back onto your stack. Sorry, not breakers, one of your installed programs back to the top of your stack. It cannot be a virus program, so that's an additional limitation that you have to be aware of. And this is quite nasty because, let's face it, who wants to uninstall their own programs? You're setting yourself back in terms of both money and clicks. However, in this deck, you can use this to your advantage. If you bounce cards that have power counters such as David or Cerberus Lady, you can then draw them, redraw them, reinstall them, and they'll come with fresh counters, allowing you to break the ice subtype again. This is a very powerful way to recur your David or your Cerberus Lady, and use Brahman to your advantage that way. You can also do the same with Cyber Cipher, which is the decoder that is fixed on a single server. If you feel like you no longer have a need for Cyber Cipher on that server, you can bounce the Cyber Cipher back to your deck and then draw it and reinstall it, targeting a different server. Finally, you have Technical Writer. So when you are reinstalling all these programs, the Technical Writer adds up, gaining you a credit every time you reinstall a new program that you can liberate at your own, at a time of your own liking. So yes, the key to playing this Brahman based deck pretty well is using Brahman's downside as an advantage for you. Another interesting line of play that newer players might not be aware of is that you can use Hayley's ability during a run as well. Of course, this means that you need to be able to install programs during a run, which you can, as we mentioned, with self-modifying code. So, if you make a run with self-modifying code installed, you can then use self-modifying code's ability to install a program from your stack. This triggers Hayley's ability, which allows you to install a program from your hand. This means that even if there's a program stuck in your hand, you can still install it during the run, as long as Hayley's ability is available to you. And you can even double down on efficiency by making a stim hack run. Stim hack gives you 9 credits, which can only be used during the run. So it's a very awesome economy card. However, it has the restriction of being usable only during a run, which means you can't use this money to install your resources or play your events. You can, however, use this money to pay for your self-modifying code installs and your Hayley program install, giving you a huge discount on all these programs that you're bringing out. Efficiently utilizing Stim Hack is yet another way in which you can increase the efficiency of your deck and overcome the high setup overhead that this deck otherwise has. It's a very skill testing deck, but a very rewarding one to play.